is a cornerstone of pop culture. You seemingly can't switch on a film, TV show, or cartoon without spotting an appearance from, or a reference to, a famous professional wrestler. Especially in the aftermath of Hulk Hogan appearing in Rocky III, the links between broader entertainment and wrestling grew stronger than ever before, allowing wrestling to gain more viewers via mass exposure, and allowing wrestlers a path into Hollywood after they hang up their boots. But for every appearance of a grappler in a critically acclaimed production, there are 10 times as many weird cameos from wrestler in the most unusual of places. Whether it's Hollywood Hogan flexing his bad guy credential in Muppets from Space, or the incredible B-movie monster films of El Santo and the Blue Demon in the 1970s, there's no knowing where your favourite bone benders are gonna turn up next. But today we are looking at those weird little cameos that occurred on TV. Like Bret Hart roasting Mr. Burns in The Simpsons, or Steve Austin literally murdering Vince McMahon on MTV's Celebrity Deathmatch. You know, that sort of thing. And before you all shout about Triple H in Blade Trinity, again, this list is about TV shows. We're talking cameos here, appearing as themselves, not a character. Unless Triple H actually is a cocky vampire with lovely flowing hair. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, appearing as himself, and these are the 10 weirdest wrestling TV cameos. Join us. Number 10, the whole damn city guy. For those of you who weren't wholly invested in teen dramedy shows in the late 90s, you may not be familiar with City Guys, which depicted the adventures of two guys from different backgrounds in New York City. Easy lark pitching for TV, isn't it? Think Saved by the Bell with more grit and diversity and less screech, and you're on the right path. Running for 5 series between 1997 and 2001, City Guys once featured an appearance from Rob Van Dam. This in itself is nothing weird, until you realise that RVD appeared in an episode in 1999 at the height of his ECW run. Now, wrestling can be considered niche at the best of times, but ECW? I mean, yeah, in 1999, wrestling was hotter than a McDonald's apple pie, but you wouldn't expect to see Balls Mahoney on Sesame Street now, would you? Anyway, Van Dam is training at a gym nearby to the City Guys school. One of the guys gets in the ring because it's still real to him, damn it, beats up a jobber, then gets to tag with RVD at a show, getting paid $500 in the process. That's probably the weirdest part of the whole episode, to be honest. Getting paid $500 for an indie show in 1999, pure fantasy. Number 9, That 70s WWE Show. That 70s Show was a show about a group of teenage friends living in the 70s. Again, pitching is easy. One episode was a whole love letter to the WWE, or WWF, of the decade, with the gang of groovy guys and gals loving the graps, while grouchy Dad Red poured scorn on the whole thing and even denounced it as fake. Bit rich coming from the fella who maimed RoboCop. They all go along to a show, and what do you know? Red has a great time watching Matt and Jeff Hardy take on each other, as well as Rocky Johnson taking on two little people. Matt and Jeff obviously weren't playing themselves, as their grungy look wouldn't be in fashion for another 20 years, but it's the other cameos which were out of left field. Gene LaBelle was the referee for a start, which was a nice touch, while Rocky Johnson was actually Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson cosplaying as his own dad, with Big Cat Ernie Ladd scowling like a curmudgeon in the background. There were nice lines from Johnson about having a son who will one day grow up to be the most electrifying man in sports entertainment, a reference that may have sailed over 75% of the audience at the time. Oh, and Ken Shamrock was there too, in a mad wig. Number 8, King Kong Al Bundy. Married with Children was one of the first sitcoms to push the boundaries of what is acceptable on mainstream TV in America. Grouchy, crass, risque, and sometimes violent, it was a perfect platform for some wrestling crossovers. Main character Al Bundy was a snapshot of the downtrodden American working class, and while many assumed the Bundy of his name was alluding to serial killer Ted, it was actually an homage to WrestleMania 2 main eventer King Kong Bundy. King Kong Bundy himself appeared on the show twice, once in Season 2 as Big Lummox's Uncle Irwin, then later in Season 10 as himself, where one of the main characters winds up in a wrestling match and gets absolutely battered. Naturally. Bundy didn't just stop by Married with Children though, as he also appeared as himself on Weird Science, the TV series. In Weird Science, 2 of the main characters end up as wrestlers in the WWF, of course, while Bundy takes a computer-simulated woman on an ice cream date. Later on in the same episode, an angry wrestler who's a cross between Glacier and Ivan Drago gets cut into pieces by the ring ropes. This actually happened. What's more, the episode in question was actually written by Ed Oklahoma Ferrara. The more you know. Number 7, Boy Meets Vader. You may be noticing a pattern that most of the entries on this list happened in the 90s. This is because wrestling was at its hottest in the beginning and end of the decade, not in the middle though, damn new generation, and because the 90s was the prime decade for cheesy, family-friendly TV shows. One of these shows was Boy Meets World, about a boy called Corey, his brother, mates, and a girl called Topanga. And wouldn't you know it, one of his enemies just happened to be the son of Big Van Vader. What are the chances? Vader turned up several times and did what Vader did best, shouted a lot and told people it was Vader time. Okay, maybe what Vader did best was concuss people, but this was a family show after all. In one episode, Corey wins an amateur wrestling match and then has to take on Vader and Frankie in a tag team bout because reasons. Then in a later episode, Frankie revealed his softer side and wanted to become a poet rather than a wrestler. Vader was obviously quite pissed off at this, but the two put their differences aside and Vader moonsaulted onto no one in joy. Number 6, Honey, I Shrunk the Hitman. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the TV series, was a spin-off of the Disney body horror / sci-fi family fun movie series of the same name, but with less budget and sadly less Rick Moranis too. Adapted for TV by Ed Ferrara, yep, him again, the show followed the adventures of madcap scientist Wayne Selinsky and his family as they get up to all manner of hijinks and japes. Like every half-assed show before it, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids had a wrestling episode, and before you say it, yes, it involved 2 untrained civilians competing in a professional match. See, Wayne's daughter bumped into Bret and Owen Hart and invited them over for dinner. Wayne said, wrestling is fake, and the Harts proceeded to beat the piss out of him. Oh wait, no, sorry, they didn't. They taught him and his wife some basic maneuvers instead, and ended up getting injured. So, of course, Wayne and his police officer neighbor have to take the Harts' place in a tag team match, and yes, they win the damn thing. The weirdest thing about this is, when it aired in November of 1998, Owen and Bret were in different companies, so this is technically the last time they tagged together on TV. Number 5, Billy Gunn, the Teenage Witch. Finally, an episode of a show where the main character doesn't accidentally end up in a pro wrestling match. Instead, Sabrina the Teenage Witch had to wrestle Xavier Prescott, aka Billy Gunn playing Billy Gunn, to help consecrate a magical marriage. Totally different. Of course, Sabrina got the win with a roll-up after Billy took a tuxedo-wearing cat to the face, and the referee just allowed it all to happen. Seriously, why do we even bother having rules? In real life, Sabrina herself, Melissa Joan Hart, would evolve into a massive smark and would get blocked on Twitter by Kevin Owens. Sweet revenge for Mr. Ass. Sticking with witches and wrestling, Charmed also had a wrestling episode because why the hell not? Rather than cats and Billy Gunn, Charmed's approach to the Graps was that wrestling trainer Ron Perlman was actually a demon turning rookies into demons with the help of his goons Buff Bagwell, Booker T, and Scott Steiner. The 3 witch sisters decide that the only way to defeat evil is by taking on Steiner and Booker in a tag team match where they karate kick them, win in 3 minutes, and then send them to the fiery pits of hell. Steiner did get time to cut a trademark Berserk promo though, so all was not lost. Number 4, Batista Needs Good Neighbours. For those not in Australia, Britain or Ireland, Neighbours is an Australian soap opera about, you guessed it, neighbours, because everybody needs good neighbours. Such people with weird names like Toadfish, Stingray and Kylie Minogue, amongst others. It was a cultural smash when it launched in the 1980s and is firmly embedded in British pop culture, but it doesn't mean it didn't have its fair share of weirdness about it. There was the time Bouncer the dog had a dream sequence where he got married to another dog, or the time the cretins from Little Britain arrived in full character, offensive portrayals of disability, the lot. So, in the great annals of Neighbours history, a cameo appearance from Batista may not seem that weird, but it's still a little strange to you and I. So, Toadfish, yes, he is a real character, and his adopted son Callum are just walking about, and bloody hell, there's Batista having lunch! Callum runs over to say hi, tells Batista he's the best, then on the spot calls him out and cuts a promo on him. Big Dave, ever the gent, shakes his hand, and they all bugger off. An odd piece of business, but definitely not weirder than a dog wedding dream sequence. Number 3, Jim Duggan and the Hendersons. Harry and the Hendersons was a gritty, realistic look at that everyday suburban problem that plagues American families. Having to live with Bigfoot as a member of your own family, for example. I mean, we've all been there, haven't we? Okay, so maybe it wasn't gritty or realistic and was instead a weird sitcom about how a strange half-evolved ape/bear thing adapted to civilized society. Speaking of half-evolved ape/bear things, Hacksaw Jim Duggan appeared in one episode in 1991. Hacksaw was along to judge a charity wrestling match involving the masked Bigfoot man against some cretin in a singlet. Okay, stop right there. Imagine the real-life implications of goading an 8-foot Neolithic beast into exhibition fighting. It would be utter carnage and would not end until everyone was dead or the Bigfoot was shot and killed by animal control. At least that's how I imagine WCW would book it anyway. But no, Harry ended up having a whale of a time and made short work of his opponents. I mean, of course he did. He's an 8-foot tall monstrosity of nature. Not even Randy Savage after no sleep and 20 cans of Red Bull could take it down. I mean, just look at it. That is terrifying. Harry was pretty disturbing too. Number 2, Macho Man Al Yankovic. When it comes to pop culture icons of the 1980s, no list is complete without Weird Al Yankovic. The evergreen accordion-toting parody song supremo has appeared in everything from Leslie Nielsen movies to The Simpsons to Halloween 2. So when the mind behind such hits as Eat It and Like a Surgeon hosted his own Saturday morning kids show in 1997, it was inevitable that stars from all walks of entertainment would appear, such as Macho Man Randy Savage. It was a perfect fit as Weird Al's show was bizarre, madcap, and often unsettling, a bit like Savage himself. Savage was going along to challenge Al to an impromptu match, but Al instead sent in his pet hamster in his place. After being reassured that the hamster was male, Randy agreed to the match. Savage elbow dropped it straight away. Yes, Randy Savage elbow dropped a hamster. Perfectly. Crushed it with his big greasy arms. The camera cut to Al wincing and yelling enough was enough for the camera to then cut back with Savage on the dock getting his ass handed to him by said rodent. Can you imagine Hogan doing the job to Harvey the Wonder Hamster? Can you balls? Number 1, WCW Baywatch. Baywatch, the epitome of weird 90s cheese. At one point, the biggest show in the entire world, Baywatch was about the exploits of lifeguards as they dealt with everything from people pissing in the water to skin cancer and all manner of nefarious criminal activity. David Hasselhoff thinks the show was a success because of him, but in reality it was because horny people wanted to stare at Pamela Anderson and Yasmin Bleeth running around in slow motion as parts of their anatomy jiggled. So we've attested to its ridiculousness, but things only got weirder when seemingly the entirety of WCW's main event scene showed up for a spell. Hogan, Savage, Flair, Vader, Kevin Sullivan too, I suppose. They were all there, fighting over a youth center or some such nonsense after Hogan got amnesia from taking a jet ski to the head. But it was all irrelevant. Look at Vader bursting a beach ball with his bare hands. Look at Savage and Hogan frolicking on jet skis while silently hating each other. Look at Sullivan in a suit and his Taskmaster makeup. It was absolutely absurd. It was perfect. And considering the lowbrow nature of Baywatch and mid-90s wrestling, it was a surefire hit. However, the drawn-out process of TV scheduling made this even weirder. The episode was filmed in 1995 and contained clips from that year's Bash at the Beach, but didn't air until February 1996, by which point Vader was already being emasculated in WWE.